it's like a big book, and the dicks. Welcome to episode 5 of the Diary of Doom Patreon deep dive series. I'm Dylan, and joining me for this dive into the depths of strange music is returning guest Jeremy Hunt. He's in the band Qoheleth, and he's done a bunch of other collaborations. So welcome back to the the main wing of the Patreon. You were already on the secondary wing in the debut episode of that, where we talked about Freaked. So far, the only good movie I've watched for that part of the podcast.
Well, I'm glad to hear that I could be a part of it, and thanks for having me back, man. This is awesome. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, so if you want to just tell people about what you do in terms of Qoheleth and what that is all about.
Yeah. So I'm one of the 3 members of the band Qoheleth. We're a noise rock experimental group, probably is the best way to put it. So it's myself, my buddy Mike Strickler is the other multi-instrumentalist with me in the band, and then my cousin Caden Withy does most of our visual art, so cover art for the different releases we've done, ancillary art that goes with all that. So yeah, it's the 3 of us, and we're just, gosh, I don't know, we've put out maybe, I think 4 albums and maybe 4 EPs and a split, but we're just constantly just trying to kind of push our own limitations and our own boundaries, and just really experiment with sort of the interesting sounds that come from heavier music mixed with noise, essentially.
One of the things you did, we talked about it on the regular Diary of Doom show, was you did the soundtrack to a short film, which was pretty cool. I can't remember the title right now, so I'm sure you remember it.
Yeah, that's Black and White Electric Light. It was a buddy of ours, Mike Fink, directed it and asked us if we'd score it for him, and we just had a blast doing that.
And, in addition to, music, movies are a big thing that you're a fan of, and they kind of play a role in how you create your music too, because you've described in the episode where you talked about Freaked, and I think maybe even in this episode, the previous episode that you were in, you said that Qoheleth was as close to a music version of that movie, which is, funny given that, that movie did have a pretty fucking amazing soundtrack, and we'll get to eventually why that is.
Yeah.
But I think that's a pretty cool and different way of looking at music, and that it's very non-traditional, and it frees you from a lot of creative boundaries, and you can kind of do whatever you want. And you're not necessarily looking to create any kind of classical or traditional song with structure. It really is an experimentation in noise, which has gotten very popular over the years.
Yeah, no, it's been, I'd say, just each time we sit down to try to write something, or each time we mess with ideas, we really, it's kind of hard to explain, but I think we're just really driven by what strikes us in the moment, and then we drill down into that in the hopes that it leads us to more compelling places that then allow for layering, allow for weird elements of complexity, but then also just very visceral. I think that's probably the best way that I can put it. We're really aiming for something that feels kind of the moment and visceral, but also sticks with you in weird ways.
If there was another way to describe it, I don't know why. It makes me think of a movie like Videodrome, which I know you're a big Cronenberg fan. And,
yeah.
like slight side tangent, but I just watched The Brood for the first time. The
Mm,
movie is really good too.
yeah,
Like brutal.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But that guy, I feel he really hits that sweet spot for a lot of his work
Hmm.
because he's really good at doing that perfect balance of like a really good narrative that is mixed with just fucking batshit insane, like dreamlike visuals
Yeah,
that that are inconceivable in reality but
right.
look amazing when he does it. Like, yeah, I love the Berg, and I'm very excited for his new movie. I don't even.
Yeah.
I mean, I do want it to be good, but just I'm like, I don't care if this is like not his best film. It at least looks like he's gonna be like, fuck it. Let me just go back to what I was good at doing:
Yeah.
goo and bodies and
Yeah, it looks weird. I mean,
meat.
I don't even know. I've seen the one trailer, and I don't even know if you can pick up much of a story
Which
based
is
on
what
it.
was great about it. I don't really want to know too much more about it.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
was
yeah,
like it was like it felt like a very old school horror movie
yeah.
trailer where they didn't tell you everything.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And yes, I'm a huge fan of Cronenberg, so yeah, any comparisons to him are ridiculous and probably unwarranted, but we'll take them.
And he always has great music, and that's my very lazy segue to talking about the band for this episode.
Mm,
So, kind of going off, the normal route. This is not specifically a band that falls within the genre of doom or stoner really at all. But I could totally see why fans of this genre would like this band, and I think there's actually some elements that they would of those that kind of sound that they would incorporate later on in their career. But hey, they did play Roadburn, so like as far as I'm concerned, I think it's fair game. I wanted to talk about the band Blind Idiot God, which I personally, just having like listened to them a bit cursory after I watched the movie Freaked, and then going through the discography today,
hmm.
it's just like, damn, what a fucking band.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
What a band that I feel like there probably were so many bands that did this same thing afterwards or something similar and
Hmm.
didn't do it as good.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they are really once they hit their stride, which for me feels like it kind of comes midway through even their debut album, but certainly by the time their second is out, I mean, it just feels like you're dealing with a force of nature, and to realize it's a trio is
Yeah.
also just deeply impressive. So yeah, I agree.
Speaks to the power of the power trio.
Hmm.
Not to be redundant, it's real. I'm always continually impressed by just three-piece bands and like what some of them can do with like the sheer amount of. I mean, this band must have been. I haven't seen them. They have played around in my neck of the woods a little bit, but I have yet to see them, and I hope I do get to see them one day. But
Yeah,
this band must have been fucking loud back in the day.
yeah, yeah. They had to. I mean, whew. Yeah, that's all I can say. Yeah, they had to have been. I mean, just listening to them and what they pulled off, what they managed to pull off in studio, translated to these recordings. I mean, their live stuff must have just been bonkers.
I'll have to go watch some on YouTube. There's quite a bit on there.
Yeah.
But for anybody that's not really familiar with what this band sounds like, I'm just pulling this from their Wikipedia page, which is where I got most of these facts, and seems pretty up to date and accurate. They're not really what I would consider especially at the time, a typical heavy metal band. And I think that even they themselves are like, that's not really like our thing. And their music is definitely like metal fusion, which they started out as a punk rock band. Their signature sound is like this strange blending of heavy metal, dub, and jazz.
Hmm.
So it's sort of like that early prog metal before it kind of whatever I guess you could say, because it was sort of like that was like the genre, except they never really like got lumped in with any of those bands at the
Yeah.
time or later on. And even classical is a part of their inspiration as well. So like Ligeti and Stravinsky and shit like that. the main guy, Andy Hawkins, had a pretty funny quote where he says, "When I listen to a lot of metal and hard rock, I think great intensity, boring chords," which I thought was pretty funny.
That is good. Their early stuff reminds me of, and I have no idea if they were at all influenced by this, but they reminded me a little bit of like what I've heard from like a Joe Satriani, maybe, just in terms of like the proficiency and the technicality of what they're doing. But they rope in way more genre influences, in my opinion.
Yeah, I could see that, like, because that was sort of like the closest thing to, like a big instrumental only guy, like him or who's the other guy? Oh man, I'm blanking his name. He's like incredibly goofy.
Not Ingve Malmsteen. No.
Yes, there's Ingve, but I mean, he's like his own animal of goofiness.
Yeah.
Man, what is that guy's name?
Devin Townsend. No.
He Devin Townsend sang for him.
Oh, I'm blanking. I'm totally blanking.
I gotta figure this out. Steve Vai.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean those dudes were probably like the biggest thing in terms of like instrumental, but they were playing like super clear, like
Yeah.
pinpoint accuracy.
Yeah.
And if they goofed up, it was like very noticeable. I think this band, they definitely have a bit more of a looser
Mhm.
approach, and probably because they play these fucking insanely heavy chords. There's a lot you can kind of mask up
For
without,
sure.
and like you can kind of just be like, it was improvisation. It's just part of
Right.
the performance or what have you.
Right. Right.
So how did you find out about them? Personally, I had kind of just known of them like kind of by the name, I think, and
Sure.
then it was after we talked about Freaked that I really like went and listened. Was like, wow, I wish I'd been listening to this a while ago.
Yeah. I don't think I had any familiarity with them before Freaked. So I think for me it was 100% Freaked that opened the door, and that title track with Henry Rollins singing was just, I mean, it fit the vibe of the credits and the overall feel of the movie so well. And I just remember thinking at one point like, I should probably check these guys out. And I think it was at that point that I realized like, oh no, holy crap, these guys are, it's an instrumental band, and this is like the only track that they have a vocalist on, which is just nuts. Because I feel like, and I'm assuming that they wrote the track with a vocalist in mind. I don't know. Maybe they didn't, but Rollins's vocals meld so well with their instruments on that particular track, where to realize that they don't really have a vocalist on anything else is just wild. Anyway, so yeah, for me that was the intro to them, and I think I started probably with Undertow, their second album, and then Before Ever After, I guess that's their most recent album, I think.
Yeah.
Those are the two that I own on CD. So I hunted those down on CD and bought them, and those are the ones that I've spent the most time with.
Yeah, I mean, just personally, I think Undertow, just because, and we'll get to it. That's probably the one that I have, but they have 4 albums out, and we're just gonna dive into them now. So, but before that, a little background. They formed in 1982 in St. Louis, Missouri, and the original lineup consisted of Andy Hawkins on guitar, Gabriel Katz on bass, and Ted Epstein on drums. The current lineup of the band is Andy Hawkins, who I also found out owns a bar within walking distance of my apartment called the Skylark Tavern.
What?
So I might be finding myself over there one day in the future.
That's awesome.
I'm going to go be a Punisher and bug the shit out of him. Also features Tim Wasquita on drums and Will Dahl on bass. And their name stems from H.P. Lovecraft. It's the name of Azathoth, the ruler of the outer gods. Not the elder gods, but the outer gods. Gotta get it right. And is some kind of like representation of chaos, Lovecraft universe, which fitting thematically for them. The music, I think, is very like much controlled chaos. It's like, it is weirdly at times like punishing, but in like a very fun kind of way. I don't know if that makes any sense. I have to give them some credit for not leaning too hard into that Lovecraft aesthetic, because it's very
Hmm.
easy to just make tentacle monsters and
Yeah.
squids and blobs and things with 1,000 eyes. It's very easy to make that your image, and it's used a lot. I like that they went with the more punk rock, like sort of abstract approach to doing their, their profile, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
They're now based out of New York City. And like we said, or as I said earlier, they started out with punk and hardcore roots before they started adopting jazz and dub into their sound. Notably, their first show was shut down by the police due to a noise complaint, which I thought was kind of funny. Eventually, they would go on to collaborate with a few people, notably John Zorn, after he saw them at CBGB's. So I listened to three, I don't know, like three and a half of the albums, because we'll get to that. But
Yeah.
so the first one's a self-titled. It was released on SST Records, and kind of in a similar vein to a band like Cave In. The members of the band were 19, 20, and 21 at the time, so like incredibly young to be
Yeah.
doing this shit. Maybe not quite Red Cross young, but very young, like to be putting out a really, I think, impressive bit of music as a debut.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's wild. That was one of the things I was trying to make sure that I was thinking through and sort of situating the context of just like, okay, this originally came out in 1987. What was I listening to at that time versus what they were creating? I mean, it's wild. Like just already the musicianship, the talent that's on display on this first album is just off the charts.
I do think it is inherently more metal, and it's a little bit more approachable in that sense. And I remember you like messaged me and were like, I wasn't really sure about this, because it's like it was like kind of they hadn't really established their sound, and like it's like probably a bit out of your wheelhouse at that point, where it's like more like this, we're being like technical, but we're also being like very fucking metal right now.
Right. Well, and part of for me, so I've listened to it a couple of different ways. So I initially listened to it just in my car, which it's a basic stereo, no fancy system
Mm-hmm.
whatsoever. So literally just listening, back and forth to work, and then I put headphones on to re-listen. And I think I used to do like music reviews and cover stuff for a couple of different websites, and I always tried to gear myself towards what are the good things I can say. So I as a reviewer in the past, if there's nothing that I have to say that's really helpful, I'm like, maybe I just won't review it, because there are plenty of people out there taking cheap shots. So for me, the I would say my thoughts on this album start on the more negative side, but it only goes up from there. So
Mm-hmm.
basically, like the first few tracks, let's see, basically from like Stravinsky slash blasting off the opening track to Subterranean Flight. Again, just for me, they felt like they were all potentially like one piece of music. Like essentially, I was like, these first like 4 or 5 tracks feel like they were all recorded at the same time, and the rest of the album feels like almost a different beast entirely, if that makes any sense. And it's the second half of the album that to me is the part that really shines. And it's not that the first tracks are bad by any means. Like again, they're technically impressive, but I think honestly, I think it's like the guitar tones in the first few tracks that to me blend all together and feel like more of a wash versus I think More Time is sort of like the mid track,
Mm-hmm.
and then from there, it just felt to me like it turned a corner, and whether it was the writing or the mixing on those moving forward, just felt it helped things feel a little bit more distinctive. But that's just my take on how the album sort of flows from start to finish. But
Well, I think in that sense, it makes it a little bit more approachable to
mm,
like people, make like music listeners sort of like outside there. So like hey, like it's we're punk, but like it's kind of more technical, so maybe like metal people. But then you'd said like it came out in 1987, and like for this to come out in 1987, it probably seemed very different regardless, because for the context of the time, 90s favorite technical metal band Dream Theater would not even release their debut for 2 more years, and they wouldn't even have a success, or they wouldn't even have a hit with an album until their second album, Images and Words, came out in 92. So that's like pretty amazing to me that this album comes out and it's like this insane proficiency. And it's not to say that it didn't catch eyes, because it certainly fucking did, but it didn't put them on like a, oh, we're touring like, stadiums around the world kind of thing or whatever.
Right.
They were still kind of showcasing like some of their influences. And one thing I will say about the first half of the album is that it's, even though it is metal, there is this like noise factor that just, I feel like, starts to permeate into future bands. Like I feel like the dudes that were in Dillinger Escape Plan like this band. They were like, oh fuck yeah, we got to play like as fast as these guys, but like all as insane, and we're gonna like jump around naked and shit on the audience while we do it. And then on the flip side of that, I felt like the dudes in Blind Idiot God were channeling their own influences from a band like Killing Joke, because I think Killing Joke has a very unique guitar tone as well, and I think they're like, oh, we want something like that, but where it sounds like it's just reverberating, but not in like a distorted fuzzy way, just like it's this sound reverberating inside, like, I don't know, like a metal cave or something like that.
That's a great description. Yeah. That's very much how that. And like I said, I think part of it too, like if the first few tracks, and this is not to belabor the point, because again, I think it's incredible, but it almost felt like they were writing. The flow of them feels like it was almost like this was just one long suite that was composed and then sort of broken up into tracks. And I really do wonder like what the thought process was there, because maybe, again, to give credit where credit is due in terms of the timing and just how forward thinking they were, I think any sort of prog or technical metal band today that would try to pull something off like this would probably almost do like whatever that ends up being, like a 15-20 minute suite, and literally call it, like parts 1, part 2, part 3, whatever, and think nothing of that. I wonder if part of the process for them with those first few tracks was writing it as a singular piece of music, but then maybe thinking, oh, well, we got to break this up so that it looks more like a tradition. I mean, I have no idea. It's just pure speculation, but
I'm not sure either. And, I guess we'll just remain willfully ignorant on that part of it. So now, it does take a pretty drastic right turn, because the dub angle comes in really hard at the very end of this, and it's literally just like 3 dub tracks.
Yeah,
and it's not quite as incorporated throughout the rest of the albums, where they'll just like have a song where it is literally like heavy metal dub and or something to that effect, hard rock dub, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah,
and it's really cool. I also never realized that sort of, I don't even know, the dub noise where it's kind of like sounds like it's like a shimmering guitar effect. I never realized that was dubbed for the longest time. I just thought that was like a cool guitar effect, because there's another band that reminds me a bit of Blind Idiot God, which is Ozzer Tentacles, and they do a lot of this dub stuff, and they're also an instrumental 3-piece, but a little bit more like out there in terms of the styles. Like there's a lot more krautrock and psychedelia, and it's like heavy, but it's more pot smoking music. This is like not always pot smoking music.
Right. Well, and can I just say too, I absolutely love that at least for the first 2 albums, maybe 3, actually maybe all 4 of them, whenever there's a dub track, it's always just labeled dub. It's something dub, and I love that it's, for as technical as their music is, I love that the titles themselves on some of those tracks are literally just Wise Man dub, Stealth dub, Raining dub. Like it's just, there's something that's like weirdly endearing to me about that, where they're like, these are our dub tracks, here we go. I just think
Yeah.
it's all. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, I like it too, and I've been listening to a lot more dub, and it's style of music I've really come to appreciate and
Mm.
enjoy. I mean, I never knew that I liked it because, honestly, like a favorite album of mine is the first Gorillaz album, and that's basically just a fucking dub album.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a killer album too. So yeah, when they, um, I need to look at the track listing again for the self-titled. I mean, yeah, I mean, well, More Time, I guess, is a cover, but Dark and Bright, Wise Man Dub, Stealth, Raining, like all those, like for me, I love this half of the album. Like it's just really, really rad. And I feel like it's the sort of thing where in retrospect, as you get into their other albums, you can see just the foundation being laid there, and really across the board, across the whole thing, which just makes this debut that much more, all that much more impressive. Just how it's such a strong, uh, first step, and then they just build on it in incredible ways in the ensuing albums.
Yeah, I would say like this is, with the three dub tracks at the end, it's more of like a hey, we can do this too if you're into it, rather than
Hmm.
them being like, all right, now we just gotta like do this. This is like fucking awesome. So like, I did have a question for you. Do you find instrumental music more freeing or like more challenging? Because I'm not sure. Like, I would imagine you have to factor in interest to some
Hmm.
degree, but I assume also that could be more like vague, because like that could be more applicable to like a metal type band. Because then I think
Sure.
of like bands like Earth and Sun who rely heavily on static
Hmm.
atmospheric sounds, and it's still like amazing.
Right. No, I love instrumental stuff. I've been a big Pelican fan for years. Had a chance to finally see them live a couple of years back at the benefit show in LA for Caleb Schofield. I mean, their live stuff is incredible. I haven't listened to them in a little bit, but I love Earth. You mentioned them. There's a band. Actually, it's a one man project that I came across years ago from thanks to Riley Breckenridge from Thrice recommending it. He was a huge fan early on, called Cloud Kicker, and I forget the guy's
Yeah,
name. Ben, it's Ben something. Again, it's a one man project, but goodness gracious, just really really rad.
I think I saw them once.
They did a they did a tour with oh shoot, I'm gonna have to look it up. He did a tour with another band, and basically the other band was his house band essentially. So
Oh,
because it's
interesting.
Intronaut, that's who it was. So he
Okay.
did a
Oh,
tour
Intronaut
with
is awesome. I
yeah. So
didn't
he
see him. I didn't see Cloud Kicker with Intronaut, but man, I
okay,
don't know who it was. I just know it was at Irving Plaza, and
okay.
yeah, yeah, because I ran in. Yeah, because I ran into somebody who and I was like, "Hey, man, how's so and so?" And they were like, "Oh, she's fine. We broke up." And I was like, "Oh, okay,
Whoops.
never mind."
Next topic. Yeah. So he did. His name's Ben Sharp. Is the guy behind Cloud Kicker. And anyway, so it looks like I'm just looking quickly. It looks like Tesseract took him and Intronaut out. And if I remember correctly,
Oh,
Intronaut
maybe
basically.
that's what. Yes, maybe that's what it was because I do remember seeing Tesseract there.
Okay. Yeah, and I think Intronaut was basically his backing band because again, he when he records at home, it's just him doing all the parts. So sorry, that was a really long answer to a relatively simple question. But yes, I love instrumental music when I'm in the right mood for it, and certain instrumental bands connect more with me than others. But yeah, there's a lot that I listen to.
I this was indeed correct. That was the show. Just
Oh,
to put it on
that's
there, it
awesome!
was actually pretty close to now. It was April 30th, 2014. Jesus Christ, such a long time
Whoa,
ago.
dang!
Personally, like in terms of because most of your music is instrumental. Like for you, do you find it like a freeing thing, or do you find it at times like fuck, I just can't make this like work or whatever? But you
You
have
mean
incorporated vocals on some of your tracks again in non-traditional ways.
the stuff in Qoheleth?
Mm-hmm.
I think there we just start, like I said, we start with a lot of textures, and we mess around with layers, and just see what comes out of it. I think it's not that vocals for us are an afterthought, because they're not at all. Not that I'm a great vocalist. I actually think Mike is a much better vocalist than I am. He just doesn't feel like, singing or yelling that often. So
Hmm.
it falls more to me. But yeah, I think for us, a lot of it is driven by what can we make first and foremost that's instrumentally compelling to our ears, and then saying, okay, how can we integrate the vocals in a way that feels more organic. I don't know. I always think of, not that this is the motivation on every track with vocals that we do, but I remember seeing a quote years ago from Jeremy Enoch when he was with Sunny Day Real Estate, and just how he approached his vocals in that band as just another instrument. And so for me, that's kind of how I think. I think for whatever reason, I internalized part of that, and it probably has to do with the fact that I'm not a traditional vocalist. I don't think that I have a great voice, but there are plenty of tracks that we have done where I'm like, I feel like something needs to be said here. There's something that I need to get out, and so I think thinking through my vocals in that framework helps free me up from just getting, tripping over myself essentially.
Right. Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
I do like, I mean, some of my favorite death metal bands are the ones where I'm like, I don't want this to sound, I want the guy's voice to sound like it's part of the guitar or something like that. As as Kit fucking so it's wisely said, I don't want to know what he's saying. It's probably stupid anyway. I quote that so much. It's like
That's
one of
awesome.
the smartest metal things I've ever heard in my life. So,
Yeah.
yeah, and that brings us to Undertow, which was like I think the album where everything kind
Hmm.
of comes together for them. Came out in
Yeah.
1988, and to go from their debut to this in a year is fucking insane. This album
Yeah.
is probably, I think this album is probably like a perfect album. It's a pretty perfect
Mm.
album, I think. And
Yeah.
it's far superior to Tool's Undertow, I may add.
Yes, indeed.
Suck it, Tool. I got you.
They're weeping into their thousands of, hundreds of thousands of dollars, I'm sure, or
Hmm.
whatever it is that they're worth.
I did think it was funny that there's like two like acclaimed, more like technical, progressive, whatever you want to call it, alternative metal albums called Undertow, released with
Mm.
like within fairly like recent time of one another, you know.
That is interesting. It makes you wonder what was kind of in the ether, artistic whatever, that caused people to gravitate towards that.
I don't know. It does make you think. I mean, Tool's Undertow wouldn't come out for '93, and I'm not suggesting like that they stole any kind of idea or
Oh,
thing
sure.
or anything.
Yeah, yeah.
And they, there's it's I'm not accusing them of plagiarism. I just think it's kind of interesting. And like Undertow, I think is their debut album. Wow, that's weird. I don't know.
That was Tool's debut.
Yeah, Tool's debut
Yeah.
is Undertow, and their
Hmm.
and then or Big, as I was referring to them. Theirs is the second one, and
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not like trying to suggest that there's any kind of like weird connection here or anything like
Sure,
that.
sure.
It's just interesting like how all this shit like kind of came out in and around that time. But
Yeah.
yeah, I love this album, and I love the way that it incorporates the dub
Hmm.
into the sound more fluidly and more organically, and it's just it's an album that I can just put on and from the beginning and then just like let it go.
Yeah.
This was reissued in 2017. That's the version that I've been listening to the most, and it
Hmm.
actually features. I guess I'm assuming these are not in the original release, but it features two versions of Freak: the long version and then the movie version, which is shorter, and then a song they did with John Zorn called "Purge Specimen,"
Yeah.
and that track kicks ass. That is an
Oh my
amazing
gosh.
song.
Yeah. Yeah. If I could dream up anything new for them to do, I would want to hear a full album of them collaborating with Zorn. I mean, that track is just balls out awesome. I mean, it's fantastic. And yeah, I'm with you on this one. I mean, from start to finish, it's a major step up from their debut, and I don't even know if step up's the right word, but just the way that they integrated what they were doing feels much more. It feels more organic, maybe, and it just feels
Mhm.
like a really confident move of like, these are our influences, these are our passions, this is what we like to do, what we want to do, and here's what we've done with it. And yeah, it flows really well. The dub stuff is integrated within some of the tracks, but then also the tracks themselves. Whereas, the first album, all the dub stuff was placed at the end. Here, it's, you've got dub tracks mixed in with more of the, sort of, I guess, technical prog ish, noisy stuff that they are doing. So it's a really, really fantastic listening experience for sure.
Notably, the artwork from the original album artwork is this pretty amazing bit of late 80s evolving into early 90s work. And everything about it feels so rooted in that time, but like I
Hmm.
totally dig it. And I like that they didn't go for it's just like so weirdly abstract and like
Yeah,
strange, and like the colors contrast so intensely on it. Like it's drab and it pops at the same time. I also really like the reissue artwork. It's like a red skull made up of individual pieces of like pipes and tubes and scales with
yeah,
the devil sitting inside. It's way more metal, but it's like still pretty awesome. I like that they have like a different look to all of their releases, and because again, I love a theme, but sometimes especially when it's a theme that's done to death, it can just be like, oh, whatever. I like that their shit just is like fucking weird and
right.
abstract and strange.
And that's definitely something that really appeals to me. I mean, you were asking about like our approach to music. Like the visuals for us are crucial, and a lot of what Caden does is very just abstract stuff. Like he doesn't even like numbering, or excuse me, he doesn't like naming his art pieces. He just numbers them because he feels like even the naming of them
Hmm.
imposes a certain meaning that he doesn't want them to have. He wants them to be very open. So yeah, I'm with you on the art for this as well. And we didn't touch on it, but even I don't know who did the album art for their first album, but man, it's like brilliant. It's just like it's colorful and it's weird, slightly disturbing because it sort of looks like multiple mouths and eyes that are congealing into like this mass. But yeah, so I like the original art, like you were saying, for Undertow, and the reissue. And I was looking at it, I'm sure you've seen this guy's art before, but for the reissue of Undertow, and then Before Ever After, their fourth album, not to jump ahead, but it's done by Selden Hunt, who's done a lot of stuff over the years for like when Hydra Head was around, Southern Lord. I think I came across his stuff from ISIS, some like tour posters and stuff he did for them. But his stuff fits Blind Idiot God perfectly because it's so detailed and layered and complex visually that it pairs perfectly with the music itself.
Oh yeah, this guy's done a bunch of different like he ISIS,
Yeah.
he did Sun, the Melvins. Yeah, he's done a whole bunch of
Yeah,
different
I've
stuff. So
I think I follow him on Instagram maybe. I don't know. I've followed him on a couple of platforms just over the years just because his stuff is so compelling to me. It's just like I said, you look at some of what he's done and it just looks impossibly complex in terms of not okay. There's fractal art, and I don't think that that's what he's doing, but that's the only term that comes to mind in terms of like just these repeating patterns that he then layers on top of other repeating. I don't know how he does it, but it's brilliant.
yeah, and even the stuff where it's not that, like I'm looking at this picture he drew and it's two people kissing, but they're like decaying in
Mm,
at the same time, and it's just the amount of detail, and you're just like it's every single like just dripping and ripping and dropping bit of meat is detailed. There's like muscle folds and you can see veins and tendons and everything. It's
yeah,
amazing. Like
yeah.
and you and then like you kind of look at like, oh, I guess they just did this in like a whole bunch of different colors. The one I see is the green one, but like yeah, like this I don't even know what to call this. It
Are you
looks
talking about before ever and after, or
yeah,
before ever after? Yeah,
it looks like many things while looking like nothing, and
yeah,
it's incredibly it's very cool and trippy. Like
yeah.
I imagine if you were on drugs and you looked at this, you would probably have a pretty good time.
Yeah, I mean, it's somehow because yeah, the I think the CD is the green version of the art, and I think maybe the LP is like the red orange version. I mean, it somehow looks organic and yet super technical, and
It's kind of like
I don't know.
Geiger, but
Yeah, yeah,
not. Like you can see the influence, but it's certainly not. He's not just aping Geiger.
right. Yeah, yeah. There's just repeating patterns and elements that almost look like they trail away into infinity and into the background. I don't know. It's wild, man. So yeah, as soon as I saw that, I was like, this looks like Selden Hunt. And then when I looked at the credits and the liner notes, I was like, oh yeah, that's and like I said, it fits their music just perfectly, which I love that. I love and appreciate that so much.
And then real quick, just to go to it too. Yeah, the artwork for the debut, like you said, it's this strange. It kind of reminds me of The Thing when it's like
Mm,
that body they find in the shack, and it's like the two
yeah.
people. Like it's sort of like that, but like Technicolor.
Yes.
It's very weird and abstract and strange. It feels very. It's weird how I look at this and I go, this feels very 90s, but we hadn't even gotten to the 90s yet.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I completely agree. I'm wondering. Let's see.
It's
I'm
like a
trying.
bat. It's like an acid trip birthday party.
Says it's somebody named Miles Rutland, I guess, who did the art, which
I
I've
have no clue who that is.
never heard that name before in my life. Hopefully, they did something. That person did continue to do killer music and killer art, because I guess killer art, but yeah.
So that brings us to Cyclotron, which is the third album, and this
Hmm.
was difficult for me to track down to listen to
Yeah.
because it's not on streaming, and there's a few tracks on YouTube, which the ones that I listened to were Head On, Dead Continent Dub, Easing Back,
Hmm.
747, and Cloud Cover. And I guess this album got some criticism that I read because it relied on already explored territory, and I can see that. This felt very indicative of early 90s alternative showing up in like a weird commercial or movie, which
Mm,
they fucking would with Freaked. And I like this sound, so it was hard for me to be like, oh, this is terrible or some
yeah.
shit like that, because it's not. But I see why I see why people who maybe enjoyed the esoteric aspect of them could feel like, okay, this might be getting like a little bit tired
Sure.
them. Like, I still think it's like pretty cool because you know what? I can't do this. So by the meter of that, like, it's good by that. But
Yeah.
they kind of saved themselves with that Freak title track though, because that came out the year after this,
Mm,
and that song is amazing. It's like a perfect song. I listened to it so much.
yeah. Oh, it's fantastic, and that was the one thing listening to. I think I probably listened to the same tracks you did because that's what I could find off of Cyclotron. As soon as I heard "Easing Back," I felt like, oh, this feels like it could be a sequel or a cousin to the Freaked track. There was just some vibe
Mm.
about it where I was like, oh, this feels like they're playing in the same sort of headspace. But yeah, that Freaked track again. It's what I said earlier. For a band that never had another or hasn't had, I guess they're still, are they still active? I don't know if they're still doing stuff.
They are, yeah.
Okay.
I'll get to that with the
Okay.
next one.
Well, yeah. So to have never had a vocals on their music before, the way that what they did gelled with Rollins on the Freak song is just fantastic, and it's just so damn catchy. I mean, it moves, it's propulsive, it doesn't feel like it lets you catch your breath once. It just keeps hammering. I love it, man. It's fantastic.
So after this album, Ted Epstein departed the band, and they basically said that they didn't want to do it without the drummer. So
Mm.
they didn't like call it quits. I guess they did, but they
Yeah.
just were like, well, we're not going to do this if we don't have a drummer. They explored some other different projects. And according to Wikipedia, there are plans to reissue this album, which I would certainly like to hear a reissue of it.
Cyclotron?
Yeah.
That would be awesome.
I would like to hear it all the way through.
Yeah.
So that would be cool. And then they just entered a period of inactivity for years. Eventually, in 2001, Tim Wasquita, who previously played in Khanate, spoiler alert, that's the next band for this, which he joined in 2001, and they started recording new material, but they started to get delayed because Gabriel Katz was dealing with tendonitis and hearing loss, and eventually he departed in 2012, and he was replaced with Will Dahl. So Andy Hawkins remains the only original founding member. But I mean, I can't speak to like all of them, but it sounds like it was just sort of like I think that we're just gonna like. It sounds like even if they like broke up, it was sort of like, well, if you're just moving on to other things, and we're just like respectfully gonna,
Right.
So like, it sounds like everyone's still pretty active in music, actually.
Yeah.
Which is cool. Some new tracks appeared in Alex Winter's documentary Downloaded, which is about Napster. And then eventually in 2015, the album Before Ever After came out, which featured 13 years worth of recorded material, which is fucking crazy.
That is nuts.
Yeah. And very similar to Undertone, this album, I think, hits the right amount of technicality that I enjoy these days. I was really into a lot of techie prog metal for a while, and I've kind of shied away from that. And it's just funny because sometimes I'll revisit that music, and it just doesn't hit me the same way, which is weird because a band like Intronaut is very technically proficient, but I find their music pretty interesting.
Yeah,
and like cool to listen to. But yeah, I loved this album a lot. I thought it was really good. And doesn't turn into note salad all the time, just once in a while. I just feel like they're a band that they're like, yes, they're good, but I never feel like they're showing off. There's still like this idea of like, we want to play really good, but we want to make it sound really cool. So they can't be up there and just being like, oh, look what I can do.
Yeah. I feel like their music, and I don't know how to say this any other way, but like this, it feels like, for as technical as they are, their music has soul and heart to it. And I feel like for me, that's a piece that sometimes is missing from more technical bands. And that's not to knock other technical bands. I've heard some instrumental bands that would probably be considered sort of in the same vein as Blind Idiot God. And again, while I can appreciate the unbelievable skill, and like you were saying earlier, there's no way on God's green earth I'd be able to pull any of this off. So there's absolutely no judgment coming from me on that level. There's just something where it just kind of leaves me cold, whereas their stuff feels like they're able, the humanity of who they are comes through, along with just the sheer technical skill that they're able to wield with their instruments. It's a really cool balance, and I don't know how they do it.
And even more impressive that they were able to bring in two people to do the sound and make it sound exactly the same. But I don't know. I can't. I mean, to me, it sounds the same, but I don't. I would love to see what it's like live. Is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Now I was double checking. I think Gabe Katz might have still been on this album, but maybe Dahl came in afterwards. Maybe, I don't know, but timing wise. But yeah, certainly Andy Hawkins' influence obviously is strong throughout all of the albums.
Yeah, Katz is definitely still involved in this one. And yeah, he definitely was.
Okay, yeah. So, but I mean, man, for a band like this, and this is not to mitigate clearly or to try to add hierarchy to any of the instruments, but for a band like this that's so reliant on the technicality of the drums, to lose their original drummer and to be able to find somebody that can fit that feel that's impressive. Because that's not an easy thing to pull off by any means.
Yeah, I mean, and this does not sound like Tim Mosquita's previous band, Kane, at all. They're very much night and day.
Yeah.
And I like this album too because but maybe because it's him, and this is why, they do showcase some further sounds because Earth Mover, I was like, surprise, doom metal, and then Voice of the Structure, surprise, drone. Like, there definitely was like, that was a very like Sabbathy song, Earth Mover. Like, it was and it was fucking rad. Like, I was like, man, there are some doom bands that wish they could play as good as this. Like, they probably did that and were like, hey, let's do a Sabbath song, but they weren't like, oh yeah, let's make a doom song or something like that. They probably just were like, oh, Black Sabbath's cool, let's do a Sabbath type song.
Yeah, no, I love Earth Mover. It's definitely one of my favorite tracks on this album. It's killer.
The good news is, supposedly, there is a new album coming at some point. I imagine that it has probably been delayed because, as far as I know, Tim Mosquita lives in Germany, I think, because he joined the band Insect Arc, and Dana, who I interviewed very early on in Diary of Doom, got stuck in Europe at the beginning of the pandemic, and she had just put out a new album. She had gotten Andy Patterson on drums. He used to drum in the band Sub Rosa, and now he drums in the Otolith, and then they're like, well, I guess that kind of puts our plans on hold, and eventually she just wanted to get moving again, and then next thing I know, I see Tim Mosquita has joined, so we'll see what happens with that. But Insect Arc is a great band too. Bass and drums, and very experimental, very cool. So yeah, I strongly recommend checking out at the very least the debut, Undertow, and before what is it? Before
Ever After.
Before Even After? No, Before Ever After. I would definitely suggest to check out those 3 albums because they are, all 3 of them are very, very cool, and it's like a really cool trilogy of albums to go through.
Agreed, 100%. And I feel like this is sort of stuff that just, for me, doing a deep dive into it, even though I'd listened to each of these before, man, there's just something about it. I guess the layering that they do, but it grows. I feel like it's grown on me even more. I mean, just with each passing listen, I'm like, man, there's just so much to take in and to appreciate. So, yeah, there's a real richness here in these, 3-4 albums.
I definitely want to try to track some of these, at least a couple of these, on vinyl because I bet they sound very cool. I don't even know what the status of that is. So, but yeah, highly recommend this band. I would strongly encourage everybody to check them out. I think they're one of those bands that I think just hits a really good sweet spot that a whole mess of different kinds of music listeners can enjoy. If you like smoking weed, it does have some good weed smoking aspects. If you like metal like this, if you're like someone who just likes to listen to any kind of metal, I think they're you have to have them in your library of bands that you've listened to. If you're into weird experimental shit, it definitely for you. If you, I think that people who are, punk rock. There's like the old punks probably like this because undoubtedly that's just what they do. Old punks just turned into like weird like instrumental rock bands over time.
Yeah. Well, and it's also interesting too to look at, and this is a whole other conversation, but where they came from initially in St. Louis, because
we didn't even get into that.
There's a whole culture there of like weird and punk and noise art and I'm not super familiar with them, but one of my good friends here in North Carolina is a huge fan of a band called Drunks with Guns, and I think they were contemporaries. Yeah, I think they were contemporaries of the guys in Blind Idiot God, and even there's another band that came a couple years after Blind Idiot God from St. Louis, Dazzling Killmen, and I don't know if they were directly influenced by Big, but knowing what I know of their music, there certainly seems to be a little bit of crossover there in terms of just the noisier experimental stuff. So yeah, there's a real richness here, a lot of cool stuff to explore for sure.
Do you think anyone calls them Big, or is that just like something we're doing? I don't know. But the abbreviation is like right there. So.
It's perfect. Yeah. But yeah.
Well, I think with that, now that we've said our piece on that, we'll just. I think we're gonna close out on a fun little bit that I've been dropping on my guests for these shows, and I think you're familiar with the band Skillet, right?
Oh no.
We're gonna do another round of Finding Jesus with Skillet, and
Oh God.
for anybody that doesn't know, Skillet is a very corny Christian metal band, and I use the word metal very loosely here.
Oof.
Fronted by a real goober named John Cooper, who, man, says some of the wildest shit.
Dude. Goober's the perfect word for him.
So, as I guess before we listen to this song, and also I know I do not listen to any of these songs before, so this is all like fresh for me too.
Oh dear.
I started posting about this on Instagram and then started doing this, and you commented. So like, what is your take on this? Because you have a little bit of history with this band.
Yeah, I do. Okay, so growing up, I basically had a fair exposure to a lot of like the contemporary Christian music scene. Like that was, I grew up in a more conservative, like certainly surroundings in South Carolina, and a somewhat conservative home. And so early on, this would have been one of those bands that would have been deemed safe to listen to because they were sort of, they were on Christian labels. But what's really weird about them, and I did go see them in concert once when I was in college willingly, and then later I saw them a number of times because one of the jobs that I worked covered a lot of like Christian music festivals, and that was less willingly. I had to do it for my job. What's so bizarre to me about these guys, and I guess if I can say one nice thing, it's like somehow they've managed to make a career out of this, is that where they have ended up musically, and I haven't listened to them in years. So, I mean, I'm saying this with what I'm basing this on is like the last time I heard them was probably 2009 or 10 maybe. So I have no idea what they sound like now. Their early, like their first album is like an alternative grunge album, and they just constantly changed and morphed their sound to whatever was popular. And so like they went from grunge to like sort of like Christian alternative like worship music to like Matrix techno rock. I mean,
so like Monster Energy Festival metal.
Yes, yeah. So it's just bizarre, man. I don't get it. To me, not a whole lot of artistic integrity there, one way or another. It just feels like they've constantly been chasing, whatever's popular at the time, but they've made a career out of it. So
I mean, like they look kind of wholesome on the. I mean, I know this isn't the best picture, but like they look kind of wholesome on the cover for this album, Invincible.
That was the era when I saw them when I was in college, and then after that, I was like, my taste. I mean, I mainly went just because it was an opportunity to just goof off with some friends, and
this doesn't even look like the same band.
No, well, and I think honestly, the only two people that are still in the band are the lead singer and his wife.
That is correct.
Yeah, I think those guys, whoever those two guys were, they were. Yeah, so dude, it's yeah.
Well, maybe this one won't be so bad.
Oh boy.
You're like, no, just leave it down.
No, and I've seen stuff because I'm on, in a few different like music groups and stuff that sometimes talk about, they come up, like he's gone like full blown like.
Oh, he's like
MAGA,
yeah,
like right wing Christian. Oh, it's like
and it really lends a very off-putting factor to like all of the lyrics about like rising up and being not even like being a warrior and all these things. It's very like I don't know, and like and yet they play big ass festivals, man.
Yeah, I mean
they have a lot of albums.
They have a ton of albums. Again, they've made a full blown career out of this, but yeah, he definitely plays up the whole like the real persecuted people in America today are Christians. Like that seems to be like his big angle, which to me is just unbelievably laughable.
Yeah, it's so stupid. So all right, well, let's see what this is like.
Oh.
Wow, maybe all the lyrics will be in German. I love these old YouTube videos.
Yeah.
I guess this is like a hardcore Skillet fan from Germany. Oh boy.
I mean, it's just full on cringe.
I mean, he still wants to fuck God. I like this synthesizer. Let's take it out and put it in a different song.
Yeah. Yeah.
So much repetition.
Yeah. Well, and it has that thing that so many songs and artists in the CCM world have, and that it's just like absolutely perfect, pristine production, so that vocals are 100% clear. You know exactly what's being said.
Mm-hmm.
So that you know that it's safe to listen to.
You know this guy likes Jesus.
Yeah. Oh, that's one of the jokes from that whole genre. Is like JPMs. Have you ever heard that? It's a Jesus is per minute. Like, what's the JPM of this song? How many Jesuses do you have worked into this song?
It's like IBUs for fucking Christian music.
Yeah. Well, and of course, it always reminds me of that classic South Park episode with when Cartman forms the Christian band.
I haven't seen that one.
Oh, dude, it's a perfect satire or satirization of this genre, this whole world.
This would make a great, like, if just, not even like with the vocals, like axe them, just isolate that little keyboard and put it in front of like a cartoon or something.
Yeah. I mean, the worst thing the nicest thing and the worst thing I can say about the song is that it's
I did not like this video or the song YouTube.
It's just there. Like, it's just a song that's there that takes up space, and
Yeah, this was not the worst one that we've listened to so far. Actually, in terms of the like music, I thought it was actually pretty bearable because I kind of like that little synthesizer noise.
Yeah.
Literally in any other song, it would be good. But I imagine that if you sampled him, he would probably sue you.
Probably so, yeah.
He seems like that kind of scumbag. But like, man, this dude like needs a fucking lyricist because it's just he comes up with like just a few lyrics, and it's not even done in like an interesting way where the chorus repeats. Like, I know metal lyrics and metal, like, you know, the choruses and stuff. I know like it's all kind of very silly, and sometimes it just doesn't even fucking rhyme. But it kind of makes sense within the realm that they exist. And it just screams of like, I am trying so goddamn hard.
Yeah.
And it's weird because looking at the album cover for this, I'm like, they just look like kids. You know, they look like they're young people trying to do a good thing. And it's before like the agenda came in. It just so happens that the music they're making kind of sucks. So this one I don't think was as laugh out loud, cringy bad. It was not very good, but it wasn't the worst.
It's just there. It's Sonic wallpaper. It's there.
That's a very good way to describe it. It's Sonic wallpaper. And not even like Sonic the Hedgehog wallpaper.
No, I wish. That would be much more.
That would at least be like, that would have more flavor to it, I think.
Yeah.
So whatever. All right, we didn't find Jesus this time. And don't know if we ever will. Jeremy, do you want to let people know where they could find you and tell them if they're interested in checking out Qoheleth, where they can do that?
Yeah, for sure. You can find us basically on all the platforms at Qoheleth Noise, Instagram, Twitter, and then on Bandcamp, just qohelethnoise.bandcamp.com. Our most recent album came out, I think September of last year, Warmonger, and we released a companion EP with it as well, Contaminator, and those Contaminator is basically a free download that comes with it, or you might have to add it on. Either way, it's free. And then Warmonger we put out on tape, and did a deluxe cereal box edition of that as well. So
yes, and I do own a copy.
Awesome. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
That I now use to house my Godzilla DVDs from the Criterion collection because the fucking glue melted off of the book and got all over the DVDs. So
no.
I now just yeah, it was really bad. I like opened it up and I was like, "What the fuck?" I looked it up. I went on Reddit and there were so many comments of just being like, "This happened." So everyone was not too happy about that.
Oh wow.
And
well,
luckily the discs seemed to be working. Found out a little fix with some nail polish remover to get the glue off, but yeah, not a well thought out design. Like it's like a big book, and the discs are kept in the back in like a thicker, whatever, like cardboard section, like a thick paper section, and it's a cool idea, but it was not like well executed. So it just kind of goes with the like, yeah, you can like, again, with the cereal box, there was no glue or anything involved, nothing that could break. It was just very interestingly designed. So I have one. It has my Godzilla DVDs, nice and safe. Yeah, it's a really cool package, something really unique. And, because I'm like, as a fan of a band like Sleep, who does a lot of weird but cool merch, I always appreciate a band that can do and pull off a cool bit of merch without it feeling like too extra, for lack of a better word.
That's a big thing for us, is we always just want what we're doing to be an organic extension of the music, and hopefully extend the experience of listening in different interesting ways. So yeah, man, thanks. I appreciate that. That means a lot. And look, I'm glad that Warmongeros, the cereal box, can house the Godzilla DVDs and keep them safe. That actually thrills me to no end. So that's nice to hear.
Yeah, definitely. So, thanks for coming and doing this and coming back on. This was a really great chat. I'm really glad we got to talk about Blind Idiot God, which everyone should go talk about, and everyone should go check out Jeremy's stuff. And I'm Dylan, and you can follow Diary of Doom on Facebook, Instagram. You can listen to it on Spotify and Apple, wherever else you get your podcasts from. If you want to send me an email, you could send me an email to diaryofdoom1968@gmail.com. And thank you to the patrons out there. Thank you for tuning in, all two of you, at this current juncture. And we'll see you next month with another bonus chapter, doing deep dives on music and shit. And also keep your eyes peeled for forthcoming episodes of Movies from Green Hell. Having a lot of fun with that series right now, even though it is the most specific of subgenres. So I wish you well. It's great seeing you virtually again, and we'll definitely have to link up again and talk about something else in the future.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, man. It's been a blast.
I have a shin splint. Damn it, I was gonna save that for a joke, but whatever.